Good afternoon, Valeriy Viktorovich. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear viewers, audio listeners, and comrades in the studio. Today is June 3rd, 2024.
На прошлой неделе наконец-таки разрешилась так называемая коллизия.
Last week, the so-called dispute over whether Western countries would permit the use of their weapons across Russian territory, deep into Russian territory, was finally resolved. Western countries, including France, the USA, Great Britain, and Germany, one after another have given permission to use the weapons they supplied deep within Russian territory. Valeriy Viktorovich, what weapons did Ukraine fight with before? Weren't they Western weapons? Then, what is this permission from the West for?
Вопрос, конечно, имеет право на свое существование, хотя он должен был быть разрешен значительно раньше, нежели...
The issue certainly deserves attention and should have been resolved sooner before gaining prominence last week.
И то, что этот вопрос, получает свое разрешение именно с Запада, показывает абсолютно...
The fact that this issue has been resolved in the West highlights the subordinate nature of our state policy.
То есть, это ориентированность наших кланово-корпоративных группировок, сконцентрированных в управлении страной.
It indicates that the focus of our ruling clan corporate groupings is to prevent the country from achieving true sovereignty.
Вы абсолютно правильно задали вопрос, а раньше каким оружием били?
You asked the question perfectly. Which weapons were used to target Russian territory before?
Наносили удары по Новороссийску, по Крымскому мосту.
They targeted Novorossiysk, the Crimean Bridge, Sevastopol, Crimea in general, and also targeted the territories of Belgorod, Voronezh, and other regions. The Il-76 was reportedly shot down by Patriots' Western weapons.
Западным оружием. Но тогда встает вопрос, а о каком разрешении вообще может...
But then the question arises, what kind of permission can be discussed when these weapons have already been used?
И здесь мы должны вернуться к тому, с чего начиналась вовлеченность западных стран вот в эту войну против России, в которой 52 страны...
This brings us back to the point where Western countries joined the war against Russia, with 52 countries, including France, Germany, the United States, uniting to defeat Russia.
Но, по признанию западных аналитиков, на 4,5 миллиона снарядов, 150...
However, Western analysts acknowledge that out of the 4.5 million 152 mm caliber shells produced in Russia, their practical equivalent of 155 mm was produced in the West by only 1,300,000. The combined economy of 52 countries is strained. Russia alone produced 4.5 million, while the combined economy of the West produced only 1,300,000.
Соответственно этому для всех очевидно сразу становится, что Россия воюет не в полную силу.
Based on this, it is immediately apparent to all that Russia is not fighting at full capacity. And if Russia simply fights normally, the Ukronazis and the United Western Rabble will have no chance in Ukraine. They will be defeated. But observe how slowly Western countries were drawn into this conflict in Ukraine. What was their initial concern? Initially, they said, if we provide helmets and sleeping bags, won't Russia see it as involvement in hostilities and react accordingly? They provided helmets and sleeping bags, but Russia took no action. Despite subsequent supplies of weapons like grenade launchers, ATGMs, artillery systems, and shells, Russia did not retaliate. Every time, all we heard was a loud proclamation of red lines from someone in Russia. The West crossed each of these red lines, but there was no retaliation whatsoever.
И сейчас, когда западные страны стали давать свои разрешения на применение...
And now, as Western countries have started to give the so-called permissions for the use of their high-precision long-range weapons against the territory of Russia, what is their reasoning behind this decision?
Они объясняют, посмотрите, за 2 года Россия не решилась.
They argue, look, for 2 years, Russia has hesitated from causing any harm to the West, which is waging a full-scale war against Russia.
Странам, которые будут поставлять это оружие, не грозит ровным счетом ничего. Россия не решится причинить ущерб Западу, потому что российская...
The countries supplying these weapons are not at risk. Russia is unlikely to attack the West as the Russian elite views the West as its master and serves it faithfully.
Россионской элите наплевать на интересы России и русского народа. Россионская элита мечтает...
The Rus Zion elite prioritizes pleasing its master over the interests of Russia and its people, and therefore the Rus Zion elite will not permit any harm to be done to the West.
Более того, Запад прекрасно видит и другую составляющую, а именно, когда в России...
Moreover, the West clearly sees another aspect, an attempt in Russia to establish fascism as the form of governance for the ruling elite. Fascism is a means of serving the West. When they see the intentions of the elite and the chairman of the State Duma shutting everyone up by saying, "We must silence all anti-fascists and it's no big deal that they dared to speak out, why should the West be afraid?" They observe that no harm has come to them in the past 2 years. Their primary goal is to establish a form of governance that will effectively suppress the Russian people, undermine Russia's sovereignty, and ultimately serve the West, essentially, to build fascism.
Но вопрос о этих разрешениях, он ведь...
But the question about these permissions is a tricky one.
Вот на этой неделе
This week, the Gosudar of Russia, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, visited Uzbekistan.
И там по результатам этого визита он давал пресс-конференцию для журналистов и в том числе и отвечал.
As a result of this visit, he held a press conference for journalists, during which he answered questions about the use of Western weapons to target Russian territory.
И он там сказал
And he said a very, very important thing there.
Он там сказал о том, что вот эти высокотехнологичные системы.
He mentioned that these high-tech systems are supplied to Ukraine allegedly. Now, one might wonder why the use of allegedly. Aren't they launched from the territory of Ukraine? They are.
Но вот это якобы было принципиально важно. И Владимир Владимирович объяснил, что никакой поставки киевскому режиму...
However, this allegedly is crucial, as Vladimir Vladimirovich explained that there has never been and is no supply of high-tech weapons to the Kiev regime.
Все эти системы вооружения, обслуживают непосредственно страны.
These weapon systems are actually serviced directly by troops of the NATO countries that supplied them.
А внешне это представляется.
Outwardly, it appears that these weapons were supplied to Ukraine for use by the Ukrainian military.
И именно поэтому Путин и говорит, это якобы поставляется Украине, но на самом деле страны НАТО напрямую ведут войну против России.
This is why Putin states, this is supposedly supplied to Ukraine, but in reality, NATO countries are directly waging war against Russia, and the territory of Ukraine is only a base from where these weapons are used to launch attacks on Russia by these NATO countries. We discussed various systems, including Patriots and tanks, at the initial stage of the special military operation for demilitarization and denazification. It appears that Ukrainian crews are now operating the tanks. However, after the first use of the Leopards, the tank crews were immediately buried in Finland. These were the tanks that had arrived from Finland. It is interesting that the tanks arrived from Finland were the first to be hit, and the tank crews were buried in Finland. Yet, they tell us, there were Ukrainian crews. On a related note, Sweden recently revealed its decision to transfer 2 long-range radar reconnaissance aircraft to Ukraine.
Но чтобы вот такой вот экипаж слетанный, и он работал.
But for the crew to be well organized and efficient, they need to study for years. Simply handing over an aircraft is not feasible. We hear that Ukrainian pilots are being trained to fly F-16s. However, the logic of piloting an F-16 is different from that of piloting Soviet aircraft, and relearning is necessary. In a crisis situation, the stereotype of piloting a Soviet aircraft may still influence the pilot. This was exemplified by the tragic death of the first twice hero of the Soviet Union, Safonov, who was transferred to an English plane. In a crisis, his Soviet piloting stereotype led to fatal consequences as he slowed down in battle and perished. Retraining poses serious complications as previously acquired skills may interfere with new techniques. During the Great Patriotic War, switching from bombers to fighters was prohibited due to the vastly different skill sets required within the same logic of piloting. The Russian Aviation School. The Western Aviation School is different and requires a unique set of skills and logic that must be mastered from the ground up. Radar reconnaissance aircraft require a large number of specialists from different professions to carry out this reconnaissance. Stating that Sweden is sending these planes to Ukraine is not informative. However, the act of supplying the planes itself indicates that Sweden, allegedly sending them for use by Ukrainian personnel, is sending them with Swedish crews to Ukraine. The question is, why? After all, the system now works great, with American reconnaissance aircraft carrying out all reconnaissance without being shot down, and their reconnaissance drones also remaining unharmed.
А если будет считаться, что вот эти самолеты являются украинскими, но по факту там шведский экипаж, и они будут вести разведку не с территории Украины, а с территории...
If these planes are considered Ukrainian, despite having a Swedish crew, and conducting reconnaissance from the territory of Eastern European countries rather than Ukraine, the question arises, are they a legitimate target? The answer is obvious, yes.
При той логике, когда сейчас западное оружие не уничтожается, пока оно находится на территории западных стран и не применяется в отношении России, эти самолеты не могут.
These planes do not fall under the current logic that Western weapons are not targeted as long as they are within Western countries and not used against Russia for one simple reason. They are conducting combat operations against Russia from neighboring countries through radar reconnaissance.
Вот совсем недавно была дискуссия о том, что вот некоторые бы восточноевропейские страны могли бы часть ракет, которые прилетают на территорию Западной Украины, сбивать...
Recently, there was a discussion about whether some Eastern European countries could use their air defense systems to shoot down missiles that entered the territory of Western Ukraine, potentially leading to war.
Соединенным Штатам во что бы то ни стало нужно втянуть Европу в войну.
The United States is eager to involve Europe in the war at any cost, and the supply of Swedish aircraft significantly helps in achieving this goal.
Вот если сейчас как бы формально Соединенные Штаты хоть и ведут разведку, но формально они типа не участвуют в войне, и мы их не сбиваем, то если эту разведку будут вести с территории европейских стран украинские самолеты, то предоставление...
If the United States is currently conducting reconnaissance without formally participating in the war and we are not shooting them down, allowing Ukrainian aircraft to use the airspace of European countries for reconnaissance would be viewed as an act of aggression against Russia.
И, соответственно, по этой логике мы в любом случае должны сбить украинский самолет.
In such a situation, we would have to shoot down Ukrainian planes with a Swedish crew on board over European territory.
И это означает, есть возможность втянуть.
This provides an opportunity for the United States to draw both Eastern and Western Europe into a war against Russia. This highlights the United States' disregard for its allies. They have no allies, they only have lackeys. The Rus Zion elite aspires to be in the same lackey position toward the United States.
Вот сейчас когда вот это признание.
What is the purpose of announcing this permission? We give permission to use our weapons, but at the same time, we are not officially participating in the war against Russia. We do not believe that we are engaged in a war against Russia. Who cares what you believe? This is bringing Russia closer to the possibility of going to war with the countries that supply these weapons.
И прежде чем Соединенные Штаты Абрамсы свои поставили, они успешно сожгли на территории Украины.
Before the United States delivered Abrams tanks, they had already successfully lost American Bradleys and British Challengers in Ukraine. However, they were eventually unable to rectify the situation. Someone pushed them to supply the Abrams tanks that were also hit and caught on fire.
Налицо мы видим, что в Соединенных Штатах нет единства государственного управления. И кто-то хочет развязать войну, чтобы так в ней участвовала Европа, а кто-то используя это стремление вот этих
Obviously, there is a lack of unity within the United States government, with some pushing for war to involve Europe, while others, playing on the aspirations of U.S. clan corporate groupings, are using this situation to discredit United States participation in the war and destabilize the country, which is already on its last legs.
И вот в этой ситуации, когда, значит, Запад в полном расчете на предательство наших
In this situation, when the West relies on the treason of our elites, and once again raises the stakes, our elites once again start discussing the use of nuclear weapons with the opinion that we must strike them with nuclear weapons, absolutely.
И начинают выбирать, а какой регион Украины
They are contemplating which region of Ukraine could be targeted in a nuclear attack.
При этом все политологи, которые обсуждают нанесение ядерного удара по территории Украины, говорят о том, что нанесение ядерного удара по территории Украины никоим образом...
Despite discussions among political analysts about the possibility of a nuclear strike on Ukraine, they acknowledge that such an action would not impact the fundamental interests of the United States or even the Western countries geographically close to the potential strike zone. The potential consequences of turning Russian territories into a radioactive wasteland do not concern them, as they will only welcome it if Russians kill Russians. How can we stop this aggression when the West raises stakes to such extreme levels? The Hooray Patriots pathetically express themselves. But I have a question. Are we conducting this war in the right way?
Или все-таки, может быть, мы что-то делаем не так? И в результате этого нас кто-то двигает.
Or is there something we're doing incorrectly that might result in someone misleading us, similar to Putin's admission that we were dragged into the conflict in Ukraine, leading to Russians killing Russians now? The war is between Russians and Russians.
Нам сейчас втягивают то, чтобы мы еще и долбили бы.
Moreover, now they are trying to draw us into a situation where we might be forced to use nuclear weapons first, giving them a pretext to provide nuclear weapons to Ukraine to attack Russia while making the West appear uninvolved. I am not referring to the entire West, as some parts are being drawn into the war due to Ukraine's insufficient muscle mass and weakened military capabilities. The discussion has now shifted to the necessity of utilizing the dwarf armies of the Baltic countries. Despite their small size, they are meant to be utilized in the fire of war, along with the army of Romania and the army of Moldova. Despite their poor combat effectiveness, they are meant to be utilized in the fire of war. The more combat-ready army of Poland is also meant to be utilized in the fire of war. All of them, including Slovakia, are meant to be utilized in the fire of war. An attempt on Fico's life was made because Slovakia had started to distance itself from this scenario, which displeased the Americans, leading to the attack on him. And it's important to realize that when someone asserts that a nuclear conflict is unavoidable, they are either intentionally deceiving or lacking understanding. What is it that they fail to understand? The issue at hand is, why is the West escalating tensions? What is the basis for the West increasing its involvement in military actions against Russia while simultaneously believing there will be no consequences for these actions? We were just discussing radar reconnaissance aircraft. Currently, this reconnaissance is conducted by U.S. planes, and we do not interfere with them. Okay, this is not a simple issue, and it cannot be resolved quickly. However, there is a question about drones.
Оставить ее только для стран, которые выходят в это Черное море, избивать любой разведывательный беспилотник который там появится.
It is not just our right but our duty to close the Black Sea to all countries except those in the Black Sea region and to shoot down any reconnaissance drone that appears there. This should have been done 2 years ago.
За 2 года все убедились, что сначала американские беспилотники кружат, собирают информацию, а потом американские же средства.
Over the past 2 years, it has become evident that American drones gather information, which is then used by American space satellites and reconnaissance aircraft to direct Western weapons that target Novorossiysk, Crimea, the Crimean Bridge, and other objects. This shows a direct relationship between the flights of American drones and attacks against the territory of Russia. We can clearly see the involvement of the United States. Despite this, we are told, no way. What do you mean, take down their drone? This is the United States. This is the great master. The Houthis, on the other hand, don't give a damn about this great master, and recently brought down the Reaper once more.
Более того, они конкретно есть видео, где они стоят на нем.
In a video, they are seen standing on the drone in sandals or barefoot, showing their disregard for the United States' opinion. This act is a humiliation to the United States, as their advanced technology is being disrespected by a nation that doesn't even have a high-tech industry. It is a major humiliation for the United States. But when it comes to our military establishment and our elite, they are saying, how dare they disgrace our master like that? Our master is weak and unable to handle the Houthis. We must find a solution. Let's establish fascism in Russia and seek revenge for our master. They talk about it directly. Even the most pro-American lackey in our elite understands that if we shoot down these drones, the United States will not only fail to make a move, but they won't even make a squeak. They don't have the capacity at all. They are incapable of dealing with Iran or the Houthis. They are incapable. And if we shoot down a drone, the United States won't even make a squeak. But from the perspective of our military and civil elites, we can't think of humiliating the American master. For 2 consecutive days, the Houthis conducted attacks on an airstrike group led by the aircraft carrier Dwight Eisenhower using drones and ballistic missiles, in combined assaults. The attacks specifically targeted the aircraft carrier Dwight Eisenhower. On the first day, the Americans declared, we will now seek revenge on the Houthis. However, when the attacks persisted on the second day, Dwight Eisenhower shifted its position from the base area where it was supposedly threatening the Houthis to Saudi Arabia. It is evident that the aircraft carrier sustained significant damage from the attacks. Our means of destruction are much more serious. Will it be necessary to go to war with the United States? No. The United States is not a state fighting for its survival as such. The transnational companies that govern the United States don't give a damn about the United States. They have different interests. These companies will not hesitate to sacrifice the United States if it serves their interests. Moreover, the United States itself is aware that it can be destroyed in a conflict with Russia and will not be willing to engage in such a conflict. By taking measures to shoot down drones and secure the skies, we can prevent further missile attacks on Russian territory. It is exactly those drones that direct these attacks. Unfortunately, our Rus Zion elite is afraid to take this necessary action. Let's consider another option. We are told, we must use nuclear weapons. Perhaps we should focus on the real fight rather than making giveaways? Even if Zheshov is not being targeted, why does Ukraine's transportation system operate flawlessly like clockwork? Instead, the infrastructure is being destroyed and will need to be rebuilt. Various Ukrainian saboteurs are attempting to carry out sabotage on our railways by setting fire to relay cabinets and attempting to blow up tracks. In contrast, there are no similar actions being taken against Ukraine's transportation infrastructure. The partisans of Odessa, figuratively partisans of Odessa, have only carried out a couple of actions, and that's about it. We often hear false stories such as, Nova Poshta loads tanks into trailers sideways to transport them, along with shells and other military equipment.
Который прибыл под разгрузку на линию боевого соприкосновения, на фронт, и она уничтожается нашими артиллерийскими средствами, фронтовыми средствами поражения.
However, despite our reconnaissance identifying trains arriving for unloading at the line of combat contact, at the front line, and being destroyed by our artillery, which is evident from videos and stories, why are these trains freely formed in warehouses in western Ukraine and move freely throughout the country? Given that our aviation and space reconnaissance can see this and could potentially inflict damage on these trains at marshalling stations to paralyze traffic and destroy the enemy's rear. Destroying transport infrastructure is a common military action, as seen in the Second World War and by partisans.
То, с чего начинают завоевывать американцы, они разрушают именно эту инфраструктуру.
When the Americans start conquering, they target infrastructure used for military purposes, not civilian infrastructure.
Как вот сейчас уничтожается наше Генштабом, а именно ту инфраструктуру, которая используется.
Our general staff, however, focuses on destroying civilian infrastructure rather than infrastructure used for military purposes, which could be more effective in disrupting enemy logistics and operations in the rear.
И поэтому на Западе прекрасно видят вот эту ситуацию и видят, как это играет на руку именно Западу.
In the West, they see this situation clearly and understand how it benefits the West, as it shows that Russia will not harm the West under any circumstances. Moreover, as I previously mentioned regarding fascism, remember there were instances of fascist behavior in the 3 Baltic failed republics. How did Russia react to the destruction of monuments honoring our fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers who fought against the Brown Plague of the Third Reich? They provided these 3 Baltic failed republics with ample resources, essentially saying, if you exhibit fascism and show hatred towards Russians, here are resources from Russia for you. Enjoy and be saved as enemies of Russia. We ourselves aspire to introduce fascism in Russia. This is orchestrated by the pro-American lackey elites. So why would the West not escalate the situation? If we start shooting down drones and hitting military targets on the territory of Ukraine, across the entire territory, especially in western Ukraine, they will back off. What is happening now? When there was recently an attack on the Yevorovsky military base, it was clearly handled by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, Putin, by order. Intelligence information was received, and the General Staff was simply forced to strike. Moreover, attacks on the transport infrastructure would immediately demonstrate the action of the General Staff itself and the seriousness of its intentions to wage and win this war. Not to play a giveaway where all the weapons supplied to Ukraine, every single shell, reach the front and our soldiers then pay for it with their lives.
по пути следования.
They don't destroy these trains on the way. Instead, they make sure that everything reaches the front lines to attack and kill our soldiers, firing against our territory and killing civilians, including women, the elderly, and children.
Вот чего добивается наш Генштаб, когда он не трогает инфраструктуру транспортную от слова совсем.
This is the result of our General Staff's decision not to disrupt the transport infrastructure at all and to allow Ukrainian aviation to continue taking off. This decision is what gives the enemy the opportunity to take off, rather than their own efforts to find a window to take off. When analyzing the governance activities of the General Staff, it is clear that the Russian General Staff, under the leadership of Gerasimov, is working to ensure that Russia does not win this war under any circumstances. They aim for as many soldiers as possible to die and for Russia to deplete its resources.
И вот на всем этом фоне сейчас зазвучало во всех СМИ.
And amidst all this background, following Putin's statement about the alleged supply of high-tech systems to Ukraine, it is now widely reported in the media. Yes, it is the West that is directly involved in the fighting.
Запад ничего не говорит. Вернее, он только врет о том, что он дает какое-то разрешение. На самом деле,
the West is only lying about providing some kind of permission. In reality, all tasks to destroy targets are planned in the Joint Staff Committee of the United States and other headquarters. Decisions are made at these headquarters, flight missions are assigned to missiles, and strikes are carried out. Yes, that is true. Yes, that is absolutely true. However, the main question remains, where does all this lead?
Вот у нас в телеграм-канале есть выступление одного из экспертов, который рассказывает о том, как воспринимаются ура-патриотические такие выступления.
We have a speech on our Telegram channel by one of the experts discussing the hooray patriotic speeches of Medvedev, who makes threats towards the West but fails to follow through with actions. The West perceives these loud words as empty threats meant to hang noodles on the ears of the Russian people. The West believes that there is no real threat posed by these speeches and that they can kill Russians and destroy Russia without consequence. We have seen similar situations in the past where some said, if you supply an M777 howitzer, that would be a red line. They kept drawing one red line after another. When we assessed those red lines, we concluded that the Rus Zion elite sends a message to the West, you can keep crossing them. If you want to supply those weapons, go ahead. We will not retaliate. We will be destroying them on the battlefield. The entire elite repeatedly said so.
Таким же образом сейчас идет и ситуация с этим объявлением. Запад, ты ничего не бойся. Да, мы полностью.
In the same manner, they react to the recent announcement from the West during the current situation. Hey West, do not fear anything. We are aware that you are responsible for the damage being caused. Your troops are the ones launching the missiles, targeting civilians, and deliberately killing women and children. Despite this knowledge, do not be afraid as we will not inflict damage on you. We hear this sentiment echoed in the commotion stirred up by pro-American fascist elites within the country again. This week, Dugin took it to the point of saying, do you want victory in the special military operation for demilitarization and denazification? If you do, shut up about fascism. Fascism will be established. And if you are against fascism, well. And then he implies, you will not achieve victory. Because the fascists and Vlasovites cannot fight against the Banderites, they are blood brothers. For Dugin, this is generally a cognitive dissonance. How can he fight against the Vlasovites when he has forgiven them for killing his daughter? He has forgiven them. Despite not initially accepting Ilyin as a philosopher, after his daughter's death, Dugin immediately proclaimed Ilyin as a great philosopher and understood everything that was said to him. Therefore, his human qualities are questionable.
Так вот, наша задача не допустить, чтобы прямое участие.
In this situation, our task is to prevent the West from directly engaging in a war against Russia, which is currently a topic of discussion, and ensure that this does not become another red line of any color that is crossed without consequences. As Polyansky stated, keep crossing these lines, we still have enough colors to draw these red lines. We need to understand that the next step could be a devastating nuclear strike on Russia, which is being encouraged by the pro-American lackey, Rus Zion, fascist elite. They assure that the West will not face any repercussions for this action. The Steadfast Defender exercises have ended, yes. However, what was my precaution? In the next 2 weeks, before the troops fully return to their permanent deployment locations and transition to a peaceful functioning format, there is a danger. These two components, peaceful functioning and permanent deployment locations, are required conditions.
Потому что можно оказаться в месте своей дислокации постоянной, но
It is possible to be at the permanent deployment location but not yet in a state of peaceful functioning, which involves preparation and readiness to strike. The enemy is actively preparing for a nuclear strike on Russia and perceives the behavior of the entire Rus Zion elite and general staff as inviting such an attack. They are attacking elements of our nuclear triad, including aircraft and radar stations, without facing any consequences. I reiterate, there is no need to resort to nuclear weapons, but rather to focus on fighting at full capacity in Ukraine. We should be destroying military infrastructure and disorganizing the rear in Ukraine. Our general staff is highly protective of these assets, as if they were the apple of their eye. It is prioritizing them over the security of Russia and showing little concern for the potential loss of Russian lives. Gerasimov is unwilling to allow harm to come to the Ukrainian military facilities and the Ukrainian armed rabble, as it would weaken their ability to confront Russia. His allegiance lies more with the United States than with Russia, a fact that the West is keenly aware of and uses to assess the situation. Their judgment is based on a lack of decisive action from our side, prompting them to escalate.
Сейчас, когда Путин конкретно сказал о том, что именно Запад участвует в войне против нас.
Now, when Putin specifically stated that the West is involved in the war against Russia, the media hype is focused on reassuring the West that they will not face consequences for their participation. The message is essentially, you can fully participate, Russia will tolerate it, even if it is open aggression against Russia. You can bomb with your planes and still claim that you are not at war with Russia. Russia will not retaliate against your planes. This has been the main topic of discussion this week. The fascist pro-American lackey elites, represented by Kiselov on the Russia One channel, are promoting this narrative. Kiselov, who is a total fascist and Russophobe, just recently confidently stated that the West will not suffer any damage whatsoever. This is the situation. Next question. What are your thoughts on the jury's verdict of guilty for Donald Trump?
Наказание будет озвучено на специальном
The sentencing
заседании
will be revealed at a special meeting on July 11th, but there is potential for developments before that date. If Trump is barred from running in the elections, how might the situation progress? Will they put forward another candidate, like Kennedy? Trump was the only one advocating for ending the war. If the national elites prevail, they may continue the war, relying on the Vlassovites. How do you foresee the unfolding of events and what repercussions might arise? The situation in the United States is generally sad for our internal pro-American lackeys. You see, figures like Nabiulina, Silwanov, and other Vlasov bastards like them are serving a master that no longer exists. The United States, as a state, has essentially collapsed. The actions taken against Trump are in violation of all American laws. They are violating and destroying everything they can. And why? The reason is that in their pursuit of power, they lack an understanding of the concept of a state. The existence of the American state, the United States of America, was secured through supranational governance. In the early 20th century, Herbert Wells, after his visit to the United States, remarked that the United States was not yet a state. It would require significant time to at least develop some form of statehood. But what happened? Within just 8 years of Wells' visit in 1906, the First World War erupted. By 1918, a mere 12 years later, the United States had emerged as the victorious state in the First World War. So, that's the point. In our book, we discuss supranational governance. We have a 3-volume book titled War State Bolshevism, which also discusses the state of the United States. However, there is another book titled State Symbols and State Sovereignty, which examines how the symbols of a state indicate whether it is a historical state or an engineered one. The United States is considered to be an engineered state, created within a specific project. If supranational governance is removed, the United States, as a state, will disintegrate and transform into a mere gangster association, which is essentially what the United States is. The country will no longer remain a unified integral entity with 50 states, but rather the states will become separate entities. Some states, like Oregon, for example, already have regions that are seeking to break away and form their own state. This indicates that the dismantling of the United States is already in progress. The pro-American lackeys who dream of saving the United States by destroying Russia will not succeed, as a corpse cannot be revived. However, this does not mean that these fascist pro-American lackeys do not desire to destroy Russia. They dream of destroying Russia, and their ultimate goal is to see Russia destroyed. Their entire existence revolves around this dream of destroying Russia in order for their master to gain wealth. They hope to gain favor from their master by doing so. So, the United States is collapsing. The current situation involves the persecution of a former American president, who, as an ex-president, should be afforded certain protections. He holds the title of president. Despite this, he is being silenced and restricted from speaking. Those who were not actually elected by the majority are imposing these restrictions on him, despite the fact that the country voted for him. The United States is on the brink of collapse.
С этим, кто он там, в золотом-то гробу похоронили уголовника, ни за что, ни про что, посадили полицейского, Дерека Шовена, как же его, да, Флойд.
The events surrounding Floyd, a criminal who was buried in a golden coffin, leading to the imprisonment of police officer Derek Chauvin without cause, and the Black Lives Matter movement, which included calls to defund the police, meaning reduce their budget, have led to a significant increase in gang activity, particularly gang-related crime. Homicides have surged drastically and raised concerns about the state's ability to function without adequate law enforcement. Previously, touching a police officer would be considered aggression and could result in jail time. However, recent incidents in New York City's center, where migrants assaulted police officers and blamed law enforcement, shifting blame onto the police, suggest a breakdown in the rule of law. You see, the migrants' sensitivity towards the police led to their inability to tolerate their presence. In other words, the state, in its true sense, does not exist. If the police force was previously seen as a unified gang, now other gangs have taken control, further destabilizing the situation. With the lack of police, law enforcement, protection, the situation is reaching a point where instead of police officers, who are in short supply and fail to respond to crimes, quadcopters will be sent to the crime scenes. They will record whether a crime occurs or not, and if it does, how it unfolds. Once the crime is recorded, how will you respond to it? That's all. Essentially, the state is on the verge of complete collapse. If anyone remembers the process of food crisis creation in the Soviet Union, they will recall what happened to poultry farms when poultry was slaughtered en masse and sent to the market. Look at what is happening in the United States. They recently had to cull 4.5 million chickens due to bird flu. Whether the outbreak was confirmed or not remains unknown. Next, a poultry farm immediately burns down, again killing 1 million chickens. This results in a shortage of chicken and eggs in the United States. Let's not forget what the central bank did to us last year. How did they harm us? They targeted us precisely based on these parameters, eggs and chickens. The situation in the United States is in such a crisis that last week Biden decided to release some of the strategic state reserves of gasoline. However, it is estimated that this gasoline, stored in the United States, will only last for 4 days of trading. Suddenly, a peculiar situation unfolded. Despite our country's ban on gasoline exports, it was promptly lifted once Biden made the decision to increase gasoline supply in the U.S. It's miraculous. Our government quickly implemented Biden's decision to provide gasoline to America to support his administration. They did it within a moment. They thought, yes, our gasoline prices are growing, but we need to save America because our master is there. What did Novak inform us about? In the near future, there will be a decrease in prices, but there may be a time lag. Despite Novak's assurance, prices continue to climb, leaving everyone anticipating the price drop he promised. What he consistently delivers, without explicitly promising, is increasing prices. This is because his top priority is the United States, with Russia and its people not even registering on his list of values. His actions are motivated by his dream of destroying Russia in order to save his favorite United States. However, they will not succeed. Numerous examples can be cited to illustrate the collapse of the American state. The example you highlighted, concerning Trump, is crucial. Even when considering the party aspect, it is clear that Kennedy cannot simply replace him. This is why Trump's sentencing is scheduled for July 11th, just before the Republican Party's convention on July 15th to nominate a candidate. It is evident that Trump remains the primary choice without any viable alternatives. There is another important point to consider. A debate between Trump and Biden is set for June 27th. Biden made headlines once more when he took a power nap mid-speech. Given this, it's hard to imagine a meaningful debate between Trump and Biden. Even with any possible medical enhancements, Biden would struggle to match Trump's pace. And the most important thing is that Biden can be given medications to boost him up, but the body's resources that have been used up must be replenished. A period of recovery is necessary, although it may not occur. Therefore, an alternative approach is required to conduct this debate in a different manner. I already mentioned that one possibility is to present a video stream that appears to be a debate between Trump and Biden, but in reality, it would be Trump engaging with someone who is visually and audibly portrayed as Biden. However, Trump must be persuaded to agree to this. Check out this court's unusual ruling. Found guilty on all 34 charges, yet not being detained or required to post bail. They are negotiating with Trump to secure his participation in these debates in exchange for reaching an agreement with him and his clan corporate grouping. From this example, we can see that if political processes in the United States continue to be handled in this manner, there will be no state. Remove the support, and the United States will collapse. The most important support for the United States is the Russ Zion, pro-American lackey, elite, which does everything to preserve the image of the United States as the global policeman. That's the reason nobody shoots reconnaissance drones down, allowing them to target our cities, resulting in the deaths of women and children, while our pro-American lackeys are only happy about it. However, their loyalty will not be enough to save the United States. The focus for them is on Biden rather than Trump, but regardless of who wins, the United States is heading towards a period of state disintegration. The state is currently experiencing a conflict of laws between states, with one state enacting laws specifically targeting another state. By the way, during the collapse of the Soviet Union, we did not reach the same level of turmoil. While we implemented laws to protect the interests of certain republics, these laws were not targeted against any specific republic but rather in defense of their own republic. And this is the principal difference. This difference will determine the measure of bloodiness in future events. Yes, while we experienced bloody events during the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the situation unfolding in the United States is on a different scale altogether. The United States is heading down a path that, as the saying goes, one would not wish upon even their worst enemy. The United States is essentially digging its own grave. If our pro-American lackeys were to consider the future, they would refrain from harming Russia now, understanding that if Russia remains strong, the measure of bloodiness in the United States will decrease. Currently, the United States is being prepared for extreme bloodshed. The national elites, clan corporate groups, in the United States united to prevent Trump from gaining power and to avoid any potential soft approach to reformatting the United States. This led to the global elites of the global predictor selecting Biden for them and guiding them towards the most challenging path. It's not just a matter of, we've chosen the toughest option for you, but rather, what you desire, we will grant you in full. And all of a sudden, another mass shooting occurred in the United States, resulting in 27 injuries. But who cares? Now, if a similar incident happened in Russia, there would be a global outcry. Even the smallest incident in Russia sparks attention. However, in the United States, there seems to be less international reaction, with the perception that everything is democratic-esque and normal. The United States is collapsing, that's all. That's all for today. Well, all that remains for me is to say goodbye and remind you. Many things are incomprehensible to us, not because our concepts are weak, but because these things are not in the circle of our concepts. The circle of concepts of a modern person should include knowledge of how complex social supersystems, such as states, are governed in order to safeguard their own interests and those of their family. Knowledge about the governance of complex social supersystems is only found in one source: the works of the internal predictor of the USSR. For the ongoing powerful maneuver, we have published the 3-volume book, War State Bolshevism. The first volume, State, delves into the concept of a state, questioning if all states truly qualify as states and distinguishing historical states from engineered ones. The second volume, War, examines various methods of waging war. The third volume, Bolshevism, investigates the origins of the current crisis, proposes solutions, and compares Bolshevism to fascism. Fascism is Western, pampering, characterized by bloodiness. Bolshevism, on the other hand, is a unique phenomenon of Russian culture. Throughout history, Russia has found strength in Bolshevism during times of turmoil, such as the 17th century and the early 20th century. Russia will now overcome these challenges with the help of Bolshevism, despite efforts by fascists and pro-American lackeys to introduce fascism in Russia. The ideologist of these fascist groups himself acknowledged, fascism is deeply repugnant to the culture of the Russian people.
У себя в работах, философ, которым восторгаются все вот эти фашисты. И он сказал, что для того, чтобы насадить в России...
To implant fascism in Russia, it is necessary to change the culture of the Russian people so that Russian culture no longer exists. This sentiment was expressed by Ilyin, a philosopher whom these fascist groups admire, a revered figure among the people, don't you know? Such a patriot.
В телеграм-канале есть...
By the way, we shared a video, not our own, on our Telegram channel where a person read Ilyin's works quite skillfully. I always recommend reading Ilyin. The person read a bit, but if anyone is interested, please visit our Telegram channel or our VKontakte page. In the video, the person reads and links Ilyin's writings to real events. This was written at that time, that was written at another time, then these events occurred, but this is how it is written. It is very well done and competent reading. You can delve deeper into it if you like. The person did a great job, by the way. Our partners for the War State Bolshevism collection have released a compilation of analytical notes from the On the World of Crooked Mirrors series. This standalone book covers various topics, including the central bank and the Constitution, which are highly relevant today. It serves as a valuable supplement for understanding the theoretical concepts presented in the 3-volume set, War State Bolshevism. Our partners have published an additional volume to complement the first and second editions of the 3-volume series. We are currently preparing the third edition of the 3-volume set, but the exact publication date is unknown. However, this additional volume can also be used independently, as it includes separate substantive works that will be included as appendices in the third edition. These separate works can function as a standalone book. Our partners have published the Library of Conceptual Knowledge series. The volume on economics has been published. The volume on imitative and provocative activities has been published. The volume, Sufficiently General Theory of Governance, has been published. This is the backbone of the conception of public safety. The volume, Ah Yes Pushkin, has been published, exploring the conceptual essence of Pushkin's work. The volume, Matrix is different from Matrix, has been published. Additionally, numerous books featuring the previous works of the internal predictor have been published, all of which are particularly relevant at this time. Therefore, read these works, master them, become conceptually powerful, and then you will understand how, by protecting your interests in your everyday life, you can also protect the country, ensure its sovereignty, and guarantee a peaceful sky above your head and happiness for your children for centuries. Read these works and protect your interests and those of your family. I wish you a peaceful sky above your head. See you next time.